Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today. Now I said about 10 days ago I have a few videos that are off the ancient America beat, but just stuff I have been looking into for a little while, or 5 years. But I've talked about some pre-dynastic tombs, and these are some artifacts that were found in First Dynasty tombs. The jackal here, and he was important at Abydos. Just like up at Giza, at Abydos, there was an ancient Anubis temple, referred to in the proper language as Kentiamentiu. Anubis is just the name I call it. That is the Greek name and one we are all familiar with. But there was an ancient dog necropolis down at Abydos, one of the most ancient towns, simply because the jackal was the great shrine, and it says that in the ancient text. It's very clear. In the ancient text, names the temple that we call the Sphinx temple today. They call it the Temple of Tep-tu-f, unless they're talking about another temple on the Giza plateau with a great shrine in front of it, which is ridiculous. Now this video is entitled the Temple of Tep-tu-f. I will leave the link below, but Tep-tu-f translate to the Temple of Anubis upon his hill. Would the ancient Egyptians be lying to us in their most sacred texts that were obviously recopied from the earlier culture that lived here? Shouldn't we take the time to figure out what the origin is of the most important shrine in the world? Shouldn't we read the text? Isn't it not worth it? The Temple of Tep-tu-f? Well, they tell us, and I'm sick of reading comments saying, we'll never know. It'll always be a mystery. Well, there's no excuses like that on this channel. Now, just a little refresher course for people that really haven't seen this before. People say, where is the depictions of the great monument, the Sphinx, coming from the most important places where they would be depicted, obviously, the tombs of the pharaohs and the important people? Well, we are looking for a lion. So that's why no lions have been found and associated with the temples and the layout of the Giza plateau. It was a resurrection cult that built those monuments, and that is pretty much agreed upon. Anubis was the guardian of the Giza plateau. And in this video here, I just show in all the tombs, he is depicted exactly the way he should be. And this depiction right here, this comes from ancient Memphis. This is one of the oldest depictions of the Great Shrine, and this is the way he was depicted, going back into history, into pre-dynastic times. But here you can see old stelas. He is sitting on the box coffin of Orion. Here his tail is exactly what we see on the Giza plateau, perfectly. The shrine does not look like a lion at all. Anubis is the guardian of the sacred necropolis, and this has just been kind of lost to history. Here is how he is depicted in the most famous tombs, in the posture of what we see out there on the Giza plateau. In all of these tombs, here he is being worshipped by Seti. Why? Because he is the great god. The first shrine. Here is a depiction coming from, I believe this is the 4th dynasty, when the text says the pharaohs worked on the great shrine, tried to restore the great shrine. Because if this would have been built in 2500 BC or even 3000 BC, it wouldn't have had thousands of years of erosion on it when these early pharaohs restored the temple. That makes no sense. There is restoration blocks from the Old Kingdom in the oldest weathering on the Sphinx, saying it was thousands of years old by the time the dynastic Egyptians rolled around. And it was also covered for most of its history. So if you think the Sphinx was built around 3000 or 3500 BC and then was already eroded greatly by the Old Kingdom time, well, that's absolutely ridiculous. It was covered, it was buried, so why is the body totally eroded by Old Kingdom time? But lion people, can they find artwork of a lion in the most important scenes, coming from the afterlife and the tombs. They can't find anything. Just a few things I want to show you. Here is King Den in the classic posture of Orion. Here is Anubis in the posture of what we see in the Sphinx today. And Anubis is associated with every role in the resurrection story. He guides the souls to the afterlife. He guards the underworld. He guards the sacred necropolis. And the dog is definitely associated with Orion the hunter, and that still exists today. Now here is a stela coming from a king a little over 5,000 years ago. And this actually, the period of about 3100 BC, it's not called pre-dynastic. That period is really called proto-dynastic. That few hundred-year period before the start of the first dynasty. And some people say it's even longer, but that is called the Protodynastic Period. And then we have a pre-dynastic period, and we have the same gods, but kind of in simpler fashion, coming from the earlier periods, but you can see how they developed. And this is a good website, and it goes over the history and doesn't look at the preconceived labels that we call these things in time periods. It says the first fragments of real humans and an organized society are from Khodan, 250 kilometers south of Aswan, and date back to circa 13,000 to 9,000 BC, and have the first cemeteries and ritual burials. And if they have cemeteries and ritual burials, they are an organized society coming from the end of the Ice Age. Now here are different artifacts from different regions of Egypt that stretch back to 8,000 years ago. And here is a figurine that's similar to other cultures that go back into prehistory. Here is a figure of a woman coming from about 6,000 years ago and tattooed in a pattern here. That's fairly interesting. And here are other fragments coming from early cultures that we really don't look at very much in Egypt. Now here is a hunter's palette, and this comes from about 5,000 years ago, and this shows depictions here. Here is a lion being hunted, and would they have the guardian of the sacred necropolis being killed in a scene from around the time that people say the Sphinx was built as a lion? That's ridiculous. Here you see Anubis hunting, and these figures here, let me just show you these real quick. Here is one of the earliest depictions of Orion. Why do I say this? Because right arm raised, left arm extended. Sometimes this is a bow. Here it is a staff or a spear. Striding. All the ancient texts, even from different cultures, say Orion is a striding one. So here he is in the posture of Orion, striding like Orion, armed held like Orion. And here he has a tail coming off the back of him. You notice? Well, this is the tail of the jackal. And that is the same with other kings around this time. If you read the text, that is the tail of a jackal. And even in the text right here, hung from the belt is a jackal's tail. This is one of the oldest depictions of Orion and what we call Anubis today, together on the great hunt, hunting the lion. Would the guardian be hunted or be the hunter? I ask you that. Now here is a little stela coming from King Tut's tomb. And here is Anubis in the posture of what we see as the Sphinx today. It says he is guarding the gates of heaven, sitting upon the box coffin of Orion, and of course down the Osiris shaft behind the Sphinx, we have that giant unexplained sarcophagus. So what we see today on the Giza plateau is the eroded Anubis sitting on top of a mysterious sarcophagus, yet historians can't tie these texts together. That's pretty pathetic. Now here you see a depiction of the wane of the heart coming from a later kingdom. Here you see the Sphinx. Why is the Sphinx right here? Well, because it was ancient Anubis, the wane of the heart. Here we have a perfect balance of good and evil, basically what this is. The alignment of the Sphinx is to the rising of the spring equinox sunrise on March 21st, the day of perfect balance between light and darkness, good and evil. The most important art scene in all of Egypt is associated with the most important monument in its alignment. The Lion People, important art scenes related to a so-called Leo alignment. They can't find anything. And why would they have a second alignment if the main alignment is to the spring equinox? That would defeat the whole purpose of an alignment. It is to one time, one place, one thing. But why would the ancient Egyptians, an Egyptian is just a Greek name, so why would the ancient Egyptians tell us that they were a legacy coming from another civilization that existed where they did in present-day Egypt? They tell us they were a legacy civilization. Their gods developed out of these people that originally inhabited this area around the Giza plateau. Their first god was Anubis, so you put up a shrine of your first god. They tell us he was the guardian of the sacred necropolis. Everything fits from the ancient texts, what we see on the Giza plateau today. Now, should people, when looking into this mystery, should they read the very ancient sacred recopied texts from the very people who lived this history, or should they just put out guesses based on pictures? Do you really look into the text, the very history of the people living that, who were a legacy civilization and recopied very ancient text, and their gods developed out of these people that lived in the land we call Egypt? That is just a Greek name for an original civilization. Everything about it tells us exactly what this monument was. It was the great god Anubis, the great shrine. Should we read the text when we look into mysteries? Well, if you don't, you're not researching very well. Hope you thought this was interesting, and you all have a very nice day.